AFCEA here at AFCEA International, and today I get to sit down with Sheila McCoy. Hello, Sheila. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you. I'm the Director of Continuing Education for AFCEA, so I run that program. I came to AFCEA after 30 years in the Navy and some time in industry, and I actually had done a fellowship with AFCEA when I was in the Navy for about a year, so I knew about AFCEA and it seemed like a good place to be.
Right. And you've been with us at headquarters, I think, about 12 years, is that right? Or 15?
Just over 15.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I guess it's 12 years that the continuing education program has been in place. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So tell us what that is and, why did we create it and why is it important?
Well, thanks for asking. We were working with a company called CypherPath in some of our training, and they brought CompTIA to us, and CompTIA is one of the cybersecurity certifying organizations. And together they were saying, we believe that a lot of AFCEA's event content could qualify as continuing education to help people with their certifications. And so right about that time, there was a sea change in the industry and the government regulations in terms of people maintaining their cybersecurity certifications. It used to be that once you took the exam, you were certified for life. And when we were getting our feet wet in this program in 2012, it was starting to change that every 2, 3, or 4 years for different programs, you had to have completed certain things to maintain your certification, or you'd have to take the exam again. And most people don't want to take the exam again. So especially a fast changing topic such as cybersecurity, you need to stay current. So we got in at a very good time, thanks to CypherPath and CompTIA, in terms of saying, can we make a difference? Can we help here? And we started looking at it. And with their help, we figured out, yes, they were right. A lot of our sessions at our events actually could be considered continuing education to help people, especially those who were trying to meet the requirements of the Department of Defense. And that included both the military, the civil service, and the civilians, the contractors who work on DoD networks or handling DoD data. So it's a large part of the people that AFCEA works with and helps take care of.
Right, sure. So people need to achieve so many numbers of continuing education credits a year. Is that the case? And can you talk about that a little bit?
It's really in the term of the 3 years or 4 years, whatever the period is. They have a limit of how many of those they can get each year as they go forward. We have some of that information on our website in the education area and continuing education. But for example, there are other ways they can get continuing education points. Like if they present a session as a trainer, that often counts. There are ways they can fulfill their requirements for renewing their certification other than continuing education specifically. And so sometimes writing or other speaking engagements or attending certain events. Our niche is we found a good fit in the continuing education area.
Right, sure. And so we offer, I know I've seen that in some of our big conferences like West or AFCEA TechNet Cyber. So can you talk about maybe on the conference side, what CEs do we usually provide, or how does that work, I guess?
Sure. Well, our reviews, our participating certifying organizations right now are CompTIA, and they usually review our sessions to see if they support 10 of their certifications that they look at.
Yeah.
And those would be things such as Security Plus and Data Plus that people may be very familiar with. In fact, that's probably one of the most Security Plus is one of the most widely held ones that people are looking for at our events, from what I understand. CertNexus is reviewing now for 4 of their certifications. They came to us first with cybersecurity first responder, and they've added others since then. And GIAC is reviewing basically, I say for their family of certifications. They don't call it out. They say, yes, it supports GIAC or no. And GIAC some people may be more familiar with them as the certification arm of SANS Institute.
Okay, sure. And I know they use the acronym GIAC now, and it's very shortened and easy, but people might know that as the Global Information Assurance Certification. So that would be SANS-related courses that they need to keep their certifications up for.
And if you look at those, that's covering a good percentage of the certifications that are required for the cybersecurity workforce with DoD. That covers a lot of them. We have approached other certifying organizations. In some cases, they say we have a very small staff and we don't have the bandwidth to review these for you, but you can say may also support. And so we do that when they've told us that we can do that. So sometimes these, even though they don't have an outright approval from one of the organizations we work with, they may be helpful to people in others. And we also can say some of our sessions are recommended for acquisition workforce. And again, that's not a hard approval by someone else, but I've worked with DoD on that, and they said you can say may support.
Right, sure. So people should look for, conference sessions that have continuing education, webinars, and I know AFCEA hosts on-site courses under our Professional Development Center, our PDC, and some of those courses offer continuing education and some chapter events. Can you talk about a little bit about those and maybe, any examples?
Sure. Well, in addition to our large events, like you mentioned West before, and TechNet Cyber, TechNet Augusta, TechNet Indo-Pacific, many of those, TechNet Emergence most recently, locally. Also, chapters are presenting not only large events like the Mid-America Cyberspace Symposium, that one, but also small events where they may just have a luncheon speaker. And as long as for cybersecurity certifications, usually it has to be at least an hour of approved content. So as long as they've got the right kind of topics and it's at least 60 minutes, there's a chance. And so we review sessions and help chapters determine which sessions may be supporting continuing education. Acquisition training can be measured in smaller increments. I believe 15 minutes in some cases.
That's interesting.
But cybersecurity, everyone we work with requires at least an hour of content.
Right. And what's the process like? How hard is it? And kind of what's your work behind the scenes, the magic that you do?
I work closely with our event planners, and I help them look at the topics they have on their agenda and say, oh, I think that will support cybersecurity. And I tell them, and they provide the abstract and the speaker bios to me, and then I help coordinate the review with the certifying organizations. And they come back and tell me, yes for this certification, no for that one. And they help us, and we populate our agenda, and so it can guide the people thinking about coming to our events in terms of which sessions should I be attending if I have to maintain Network Plus. And so they can find that on our agenda.
Right, sure. And you mentioned the most recent conference that AFCEA held, which was a brand new one for us. We brand new, created it and held it for the first time this year. It was held in Reston, March 11th and 12th. And it really focused on TechNet Emergence. It focused on, startup technologies, emerging technologies. It delved into AI and quantum and biotechnology. And I got to attend as a reporter, and it was terrific. I learned so much, and it was great to hear about, those upcoming technologies. Can you talk about some of the certifications that you worked quickly to get for those, if you remember?
Oh, goodness. I know, for example, one would have been Certain Access with their Certified Artificial Intelligence Practitioner.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because there was an IA session at that event.
Yeah.
So I know that was one example.
Yeah. And that's such a growing field, the booming of AI. It's been around, for decades, but so I love that knowing people can get CEs for that to keep up their AI.
I get really excited about this, and at TechNet, TechNet Augusta is really, I have to say, our superstar in this, and they had over 30 sessions last year at their event, and it was the 10th year we've been doing it. That was really exciting. And TechNet Indo-Pacific was right up close with last year.
Right, sure.
TechNet Cyber next, probably. They're really superstars.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, someone comes to the event and they don't have to register for these sessions separately. They go to the sessions that have what they think they need. And then we have an added benefit. And we haven't really talked about this, but if you're a current AFCEA member and you get your badge scanned as you leave the session as a record of your attendance at the session, we can provide you formal attendance documentation that you can send into the certifying organization to which you have to report to maintain your certification. So people can do their own, and we have tips on the website. However, we can do it for them if they're an active member. And so that's the benefit of membership.
Yeah, that's great. So that's easy. So you attend the session at a conference, let's say coming up in Baltimore, you're sitting in the room and you sit there during the session, and at the end you get your badge scanned. And then, yeah, I love that. That's so great.
And then a few weeks later, we send an email, and you can forward that on to CompTIA or GIAC or Certain Access, and sometimes to others too who will accept that kind of cross connection.
Yeah. And so what are the things you're working on now?
Oh, we're into TechNet Cyber. We already have sessions approved for TechNet Cyber, several. We already have several sessions approved for TechNet Augusta.
Oh, okay, sure.
And we know that we will have at least, we have 3 that are tentative. We don't have the specific topics also for TechNet Indo-Pacific. So we're looking well ahead. And we have certain ones that we know we can plan on each year because, for example, our idea panel usually has a continuing education supported topic. Our emerging leaders panel normally has a continuing education topic. So, and often for the big ones like TechNet Cyber and TechNet Augusta and TechNet Indo-Pacific, CompTIA also usually brings in a longer training session for people. And it's ranged, and they've had at least one that was 5 hours, but they normally are 3 hours.
Oh, right.
And it's just so good that it's such a good opportunity for people to come to when they're there for the event already.
Right, sure, absolutely. You check those boxes and keep your knowledge current. And I think that corporate members have some sort of benefit associated with continuing education. Do you assist corporate members in kind of advising them on if they're hosting an event or a webinar? Can you talk a little bit about that? Particularly
with the webinars, the Signal webinars.
Sure.
If they're coming through Signal to get a Signal webinar, and Signal webinar tells me then if it's a member and if they're interested in getting a review for continuing education, and I help process those the same way we do our event sessions.
Okay, sure.
And we've had some companies that have really, I think, broken the code on it. Once they understood what it is we need to tell the reviewers to get their sessions approved, they started writing their descriptions a little differently, and I'm betting it's helping get more eyes on their webinar.
Right,
I
sure.
don't have the numbers,
Right, sure.
but
Yeah.
I just know when my time is limited and I'm looking at a description like that and it has the added factor that it says qualifies for continuing education to maintain this certification, I'm thinking, oh, if it's that one or this one, I may go to that one.
Right, sure. And you can do that from, obviously it's virtual or, from home or, wherever.
And this was especially valuable to people during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I had people emailing me saying, what can AFCEA do for me when we're not going on site? I need something I can do from home. And I said, well, okay, these webinars are coming up. They're on our website. And these online events, but especially between the bigger events that we were doing virtually, several people made use of the webinars. I know because they reached out to me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for evolving to meet that need. I mean, pandemic kind of, we are all kind of evolving in some way, but that's great that we are still able to offer that.
Oh, I love a good challenge.
Yeah. And then also chapter events. Any advice to chapters if they want to host an event that's also continuing education?
Chapters are especially challenged because they're all volunteer run. And I know I've been a chapter officer, or at least 3 chapters in other lives, and they often are working right up to the last minute to determine who their speaker for a luncheon, for example, will be. And so it's really an extra challenge for them. I still like to try to do it.
Yeah.
And we have good relationships with our reviewers, and they try to turn things around as best as their schedules allow. And so we're still able to help. Especially for the big events, I encourage the chapters to come in well in advance as far as they can. And it's never too early to ask.
Sure.
And then it can sit out there and be ready. Plus, the advantage of doing things further ahead of time is you can use that in your marketing for your event and tell people what it's going to offer them. And often if somebody from, for example, Department of Defense is going, that can be a justification for their boss to say, oh yes, you can go to that event because it's maintaining a required certification. And years ago, back when there was really a tightening down on travel and event attendance, I was told by our folks who were at the events that this was making a real difference in terms of keeping our events available to people because they could justify coming if they knew they could maintain their certifications.
Right, true. And anything else to share about the continuing education that maybe we missed or that you wanted to highlight?
Oh, let me think. I think it's a wonderful program. I know it's just, and I get to work with wonderful people, and I find it exciting because we're giving people or helping them get something they need. They know they need it. They appreciate getting it. If some people within an hour of taking a session at our event, they email me and say, when do I get my attendance documentation? Well, I have all that on the website, but I have to chuckle because I say, they really wanted this. Yeah. They need it. And they know they need it. And we can help them. And it makes it exciting to work in a job where you know you can do something that matters.
Yeah.
And it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to, your background is so fascinating. Do you mind sharing kind of a little bit about yourself and even starting kind of, about your background or how your family, your family ties to the military?
Oh, thanks. We have lots of stories. The generation ahead of me, really, quite a few people served in the military. My mother was one of 4 children, and 2 of the 3 women served in the military. Mom was a naval officer, and my aunt was an Army nurse. And then one uncle, he was a biologist, and he helped train aviators on what they could safely eat if their plane was grounded, something like that, survival, that sort of thing. My father was one of 5 boys, and 4 of them served in the military, including one who was a POW in Germany, and they all made it back safely. And I was so inspired by their stories. And they didn't always talk about the work they did. They talked about the people they met, the places they saw, the travel opportunities, the training opportunities. And that was all inspiring to me. And I found that in college, I was a real generalist. I wanted to learn a little about a lot of things instead of diving deep into one. And in fact, the way I chose my college major when I was pressed to do that was I went through the college catalog and checked off every course I thought I was interested in, and then looked to see where the largest cluster was. So I majored in English and minored in history. Well, at that time, that was okay for the Navy. They weren't looking for just STEM. And so, so I had opportunities. And when I came in, while I was in the Navy, I got 2 master's degrees, one through the old GI Bill, and one at the Naval Postgraduate School. And I ended up in very technical fields. So they didn't limit me or limit my opportunities. And I still tell people it was a privilege to serve, and the best thing was the people. Hardworking people from all over, different backgrounds, pulling together to get the job done. And it was never boring. Not in 30 years. It was never boring.
And did you have a choice to go somewhere other than Navy with both your parents have served in the Navy?
Actually, this is kind of funny, but they both encouraged me to go into the Air Force.
Oh, interesting.
They said
yeah.
the Air Force took better care of its people. And Air Force was still pretty new.
Right.
And yet I was drawn to the Navy.
Sure.
And Mom and Dad were both in the Navy. So I had heard those stories. And plus I really liked being around the water.
Sure,
That plays into it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't regret it at all. Not at all.
And what were I feel like you were a pioneer as a female, captain in the Navy. What were kind of the early days like when you first started? Did you do ROTC in college and then went in?
Now that's an interesting question because the pipelines were very limited at that point. Naval Academy was not, the military academies were not available to women at that time. ROTC was just starting to open for women, and they weren't available in New England, which was where I was. And my mother asked at a meeting of retired officers one time when the speaker was presenting information about ROTC, and they said, well, we don't need to provide any extra incentive to women in this area because they're signing up anyway.
Right.
She was not pleased at that answer. So ROTC wasn't available. So I went through Officer Candidate School, which interestingly enough was in my hometown. They didn't even want to honor my travel claim for 2 miles to go to Officer Candidate School. But so that's how I came in through that pipeline. And each has its advantages and disadvantages. Those who went to Officer Candidate School would come in after college.
Sure.
So you go to college on your own.
Yeah, and then you do like a summer training that after you graduate of, I don't know how many months in offered OCS.
For OCS, at that time, it was 19 weeks.
Wow.
They've shortened it some since then.
Yeah.
And we were the first class that went through that was considered post-Vietnam era. The month before us, that class was still considered Vietnam era.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And we were also the first class where the companies were co-ed. We had our gym classes together, that sort of thing.
Okay, sure.
We had all our classes together. But before us, it had been in different groups. Like they'd had women officers school, but they weren't in with the men.
Right, sure.
So.
And what were some of the places you were stationed that you remember?
Oh, I started out on the Outer Banks of North Carolina at Cape Hatteras.
Wow.
Working anti-submarine warfare, undersea surveillance. And at the time it was highly classified. It isn't anymore, but it was, yes, we were listening, looking for things. Yeah. And that was a real learning experience. And let's see, oddly enough, I served in the DC area over half my career in different assignments, either in Virginia or in DC, because a lot of our computer centers are here.
Got it, sure.
And I went to Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. My command tour was in Oregon, Coos Bay, Oregon, doing another one of those undersea surveillance commands. And I was on an IG team where we inspected our communication centers around the world. And that got me to places like Sicily and Japan, and Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, Adak, Alaska, which is sort of closer to Russia than to mainland United States, but interesting, very interesting. And so, like I said, a lot of time in the DC area, which is kind of funny because when I was coming through, a lot of people didn't want to be in DC. They thought it was crowded and busy and chaotic and a lot of traffic. And so because I was willing to take those assignments, I got some very interesting assignments as a very junior officer in terms of learning about ADP security in the Pentagon and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Right, that's good advice.
And I was actually in the Pentagon on 9/11 for a cybersecurity meeting.
Wow.
And got out safely.
Right, that must have been so scary that day.
It's still, especially on 9/11, or telling someone about it.
Yeah.
My voice wavers a little because I think of all those who didn't. And I only went to 2 meetings in the Pentagon a month in that job. I was over in Crystal City in Arlington normally. And yet that was the day for that month.
Right.
And it was a meeting of the representatives at normally the captain or colonel level for cybersecurity for each of the military forces, and we would get together and talk about common issues. And someone came to the OSD conference rooms and said, we all need to leave now.
Yeah.
But interesting experience, lots of interesting experiences, not all so public as that.
Right, sure, yeah. And you did one of your thesis on why the military should use grocery industry standard database tools. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The grocery industry had been really early in learning to scan barcodes to get information and share information. And they came up with ways that either the truckers, those moving things among stores, the suppliers that the things came from, the cashiers checking things out, could all use the same information because they'd agree to share it in a certain way. Now, we were having challenges in the military, for example, when I would work in a command center, and the carrier George Washington would be named 5 or 6 different ways. It would be the GW, it would be the GEO Wash, it would be the George Washington, and that's tedious to match the right things in the database if it's named different ways every time it's in there. So data standardization was an issue. It was about how do we exchange the information. Of course, we've come a long way since then because now with HTML and things beyond, it's much easier to share information than it used to be. But we were having a tough time then, and someone said to me, why don't you address what the grocery industry is doing and see if you could convince them that that was a good model for sharing information in the military. So the rewarding thing about that was not only did my thesis get approved, but someone in the next class used mine as a reference and they took it a step further. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
You know, somebody read it and somebody thought there was something there.
Right. I love that. I mean, even today, the Navy is still grappling with data standardization and leveraging all that to use AI and decision making. So
we get overwhelmed with data.
Yeah.
And we've got to, as we move forward to use more and more automated tools, we have to be able to ascertain the quality of the data and be able to trust it. Data validity, so many exciting challenges there.
Right. Well, I love knowing that you planted a kernel, a seed back then that kind of helped them on their way. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to share about your experience in the Navy?
I encourage anyone who's even curious about it a little to look into it, because there are great opportunities, great training opportunities, development. You get to work with wonderful people. You sometimes get yourself tested to do things you didn't even know you could do. And you come away richer for it because you find things about yourself that you can do. You're given so much opportunity at such a young age in the military. A lot of the rest of the world doesn't realize that. I mean, you look on the deck of a carrier, the people that are telling those planes what to do, very, very young.
Yeah. Right, and maybe in corporate industry, it's more of a top-down where, the more senior leaders, have opportunities where the younger people aren't doing as much. So I love knowing that in the military, it's more hands-on, early on, quickly.
And everybody matters.
Yeah.
Truly, everybody matters. It is a sort of pyramid, of course, but everybody matters. And I like that too.
Right, sure. And any advice to leaders today that you would offer?
Make sure your people know what you need of them. You don't always have to tell them exactly how to do it, but you have to tell them what you expect to have done. What's the result we're looking for? And I think if you get that message clear, people will get together and sometimes come up with creative things you've never thought of if you're open-minded enough to try them. There's no one too junior to have a good idea. That's an important lesson, I think. And the other thing is, one of my funniest lessons I learned was I didn't have to know everything because I had wonderful teams. What I needed to do, especially like when I made captain and I was serving at Naval Space Command as the Chief Information Officer, and I thought, wow, I've got people who really know lots of stuff. My job is to help make sure they have the resources to get the job done and know who's on first and remember to talk to each other. There were times I had to say, now before you bring your problems to me, you, the software person, need to talk to the person on the ops floor and figure this out, and then come together with your plan to me. And so it's helping guide the team and mostly make sure they have what they need. Another really key one, and this is true from the bottom up, bad news does not age well in hiding. If you think something's going to go wrong, it's better to tell your boss and say, this is how I think we should handle it, and it might not even happen, but I'd rather tell you now, don't let your boss be surprised by something bad. I'd rather have them say, well, you made that a big thing and it didn't happen. I'm glad to be wrong in that case.
Right.
But I don't want to be the one where the boss hears it from someone else and it comes down and he's, why didn't you tell me about this? Well, I wasn't sure. No, that's not the way. Take a chance.
Yeah.
Help other people be prepared, especially because sometimes bad things can get worse fast.
Right.
And if you pull the right people together, you can come up with good solutions.
Right. Yeah, that's really great advice. And was it hard being a CIO?
Oh, it was fun,
Yeah.
I thought, because it wasn't just about all the technical bits and pieces. And it was about how do we use information? Who needs it? Who has it? How they share it? What can we do with it? How can we use it smartly? And that to me was really the fun of being in information. There were plenty of people who knew way more about it than I did in terms of both the communication side of information and the what we used to call data processing side, as those all merge more and more and overlap. It's hard to distinguish. But I'm not an engineer, but part of what my degree at Monterey was to help me be the person between the engineers and builders of things and the people with the requirements of we need this for this program. Help them talk to each other, so know enough about engineering and enough about the mission to help talk in the middle. And that kept things fun and challenging.
Right.
Boy, did I learn a lot of bits and pieces along the way. I'm still learning every day.
Right.
Of course, IT is that way, and cybersecurity especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else you wanted to share?
Oh, thanks for asking about our program. I really think AFCEA has a lot to offer in this way. It's worth looking at AFCEA events in terms of continuing education. It's not just go walk the floor and see what giveaways the exhibitors have, but it's a real true opportunity to help maintain certifications. And certifications are a big piece of the cybersecurity workforce in terms of improvement and moving up. You want another job? Go check and see what certifications are required for that job role. And the way DoD's mapping it out now by job role, you can say, I really think I want that job. I can go look and see what's required for that job role and map it back and look at the certifications and see if you can go about getting the certification. And for industry, and I hadn't thought to mention this before, many times in industry, they will give you a pay raise if you get a certification that they want you to have for cybersecurity.
Sure, absolutely.
So you get a pat on the back end, you know more stuff.
Yeah. That's key. Well, thanks for being the rock for our continuing education at AFCEA, and thanks for all your efforts and for sharing your experience.